Introducing NASM One, NASM's ultimate membership program. Unlock access to everything your fitness career needs to succeed. Unlimited CEUs, free courses, access to our premium app, and exclusive discounts, all for $35 a month. NASM One is best-in-class tools, cutting-edge certifications, confidence in your craft, and everything you do as a personal trainer made easy, so we can achieve our greatest goals together as one.
You're listening to Random Fit with hosts Wendy Batts and Ken Miller, winner of a Gold Markham Award for Digital Media.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Random Fit with myself, Wendy Batts, and friend and co-host Ken Miller. Ken, how are you?
I'm doing well, Wendy. How you doing?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you. I always say this, and our producer gets upset, but I like this topic a lot because in the next couple days, actually, the NFL combines are going to be happening, and we get to see it live if you're interested in that. And I know, Ken, you and I have both trained a lot of people to get them ready for the combines in the past, and we often get questions about what they test for, why they test for it, kind of the history about it. So that's all the stuff we're going to cover today.
Yeah, and when it comes to the NFL Combine or the NBA Combine, for that matter, it's just a big audition, really, right? They go to the stadium, they show how well prepared that they are, so that the general managers, the coaches, the ownership can see what is or who is going to be available to them when it comes draft time. So I like the NFL, or actually I like this topic about the NFL Combine because I don't know, Wendy, if you've watched the NFL Network when they show the Combine, and because it's all that's on, right? And of course, the sports news networks, they'll have the Combine highlights. So I think it's fair because I get questions about it from associates of mine, and I'm sure you do too, as far as, okay, well, did you see these guys? They ran their 40. They benched so many reps. But I think a lot of people don't understand really what goes into the preparation for these basically college kids as they get ready to, perform for the combine. So it's a good topic. I think we'll answer a few questions on what happens on the inside of the combine curtain.
Yeah, the inside. But I mean, just for a little background, I mean, the first actual combine was held in Tampa, Florida, which if you guys watch it now, you're going to notice that it's in Lucas Oil Stadium. That's always in Indy. But the first one was actually held in 1982. And this is when the Scouting League was like, we're going to put this invitation only kind of deal together. We're going to see what people can do. How fast can they run? How high can they jump? What kind of routes can they run and how they do in comparison to some of these other players. And I mean, if you look at it now, you're looking at over 300 or so invitations that go out currently. And then, of course, it's a little more than that. But, I think last year was like 319. But when it first started, it was 163 players. And there was about 16 members of different types of clubs and organizations that were there. And as you mentioned, it was the general managers, it's the scouts, it's the coaches, it's the owners, and they're all watching these individuals. However, if you watched the Super Bowl a few weeks ago, you're going to notice too that the combines don't always say how talented an individual can be, because you're always going to have that first round draft pick. And that's one of the reasons they do this, especially some now with the NIL money. People are coming out of high school getting paid. Now they're doing this in college. And sometimes, I mean, people get nervous. I get nervous when I test. When I sit in front of a test and I'm doing whatever it is, whether it's mentally and I'm doing it pen and paper, whether I'm doing it on the computer or I'm out in the field doing something, I may not perform at my best because my nerves get the best of me. And again, on the big screen, when you're playing in the NFL, there's always TVs and stuff on you. So it's trying to get people used to it. But as you say, kind of behind the curtain, and that's, the reason for the episode name, there's a lot that goes into the training to get these guys ready for sure.
So I think one of the first things that a lot of people don't understand is that the second that a team, a college football player, once they've declared, they know that they're going to go and they're going to be draft eligible. And like you said, Wendy, they get that invitation, or if they know that this is what they have to get ready for by this date, which is this year, it's going to be at the end of February. As soon as they finish their last game, whether it's their last regular season game, if they didn't qualify for a bowl game, and or right after that bowl game, that's when they get ready. So a lot of times, as soon as they finish their last game that next weekend, they're flying off to whatever training facility that they're going to train at. Or you have some players that maybe not as high a potential. They may do something more local to themselves for themselves when it comes to those, because when they go to these training facilities, and there's a few, there's more than a few in Arizona. There's, and Wendy, when it comes to Florida has combine prep facilities. Basically, they'll go to a place where a lot of times it's where the agent wants them to go, or their strength coach has a preference for them to go and be somewhere, a place that usually has a great reputation for getting athletes ready, because they have the facilities, they have the coaches, and a lot of times these facilities, they make a lot of their revenue stream for during these 2-3 months in getting these athletes ready for the combine. So first thing is first is when they do it. And a lot of times if they've incurred an injury over the season, they've got to get over that. And on top of getting ready physically for the battery of tests and assessments that they're going to go through during that combine, because a lot of people don't realize how broad an assessment process when it comes to their strength, their power, not just their acumen when it comes to football, but there's a lot that they have to get ready for. So the more time, the better. And usually it's right after that last game, things get rolling.
Well, and people often ask, just before we even kind of dive even deeper, like what are the key tests or drills that they're going to perform at the combines? And if you have never checked it out and watched it, it is something that I love to watch. But they'll do the 40-yard dash. They do a bench pressing of 225 pounds, vertical jump, broad jump, 20-yard shuffle, a 3-cone drill, a 60-yard shuttle, and then a position specific drill, or different drills that they're going to do based on their positions. And so when you think about all of that, one of the things that I love and I have been successful with, especially at this time of year, when we know that there are people going into the combines, is working hand on hand with the people that are more of the strength and conditioning coaches that are helping these individuals with the 225, bench press and the things that are going to be kind of set weight, and they're going to have to perform multiple times and do different things. My way of working with these individuals is to make sure that they have ideal range of motion. So when they are doing these different shuttles, when they are doing the 40-yard dash, that they can come out of the blocks as explosively as possible. And I tell this to parents all the time, that even though your kid is very talented and they are scheduled to maybe go in their first round draft pick, we need to make sure they move as ideally as possible, because injuries can happen. You get someone out of the blocks and they're not prepared the right way, they're going to blow a hammy if they're not careful, or you're going to see things happen where people twist an ankle, and, injuries can happen on the fly, non-contact. We talked about that. But if you are going to have or you are one of those individuals that have been invited, because remember, to be in the combines, it's an invitation only. You can't just say, I'm going to go to the combines today and see how I do. So it's an invitation only type event where they know that you're going to be capable. They think that you are going to be a good draft choice. It's just where, when, what position. And so if you can get someone moving and working as ideally as possible in that position, they're going to go higher, which means if they go higher, they make way more money.
It's a huge difference. So if you are, a lot of people don't realize that if you are draft eligible, that position between getting drafted 9th and 10th can be millions of dollars, right? Mm-hmm. Not to mention if you have a bad showing, like you don't run as fast, or you drop a few footballs that have been thrown your way. First round versus third round. And, I've talked to a couple of the guys I've worked with, over the years. And it's, unless you're getting some sponsorship money, unless you're on commercials or things like that, you will not make that money back up contractually. So that's why those first 3 months are of training for the combine are very important. And to your point, Wendy, when it comes to being healthy, you can't show up hurt. You can't, if you had a nagging ankle or low back or shoulder injury, uh, having adequate range of, just because not just the fact that you might carry an injury with you from the season into training for the combine, but the training itself is rigorous, right?
Oh,
The training itself is going to beat you up. So implementing strategies, whether you have a manual therapist like yourself, Wendy, physical therapists on site, unless if you're looking at training facilities, what do they do to augment the power and the strength training that the traditional strength coach will incorporate into your training program? But are they incorporating things like corrective exercise, yoga, Pilates, things that will help emphasize achieving optimal range of motion? But a lot of people don't realize the training itself is rigorous. So when we talk about the complete training cycle, or completing the picture when it comes to what these athletes need, this is what we're talking about here on Inside the Combine Curtain with both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller, here on this episode of Random Fit. So, you listed off more than a few assessments, Wendy. So to train for all of those for a span of 2-3 days, it's a lot of stress and strain on the body.
it is. And, when we talk about corrective exercise, people are like, yeah, but I'll do that after the fact. But here's the thing. If you have an athlete that comes and they have overactive calves, they're running, they're jumping, they're doing different drills, they're constantly doing all this, and they're not taking time to foam roll and stretch or get some manual therapy to realign or re-lengthen that tissue back into its proper state and activate the opposing side. If you're lacking dorsiflexion, which is just basically range of motion at the ankle, that can limit how high somebody can jump. And if you're limited at your ankle, then you're going to be limited at what the knee is able to perform. And that's when, if somebody jumps and their knees start to go down and cave inward, of course, that to me is a red flag. A lot of people see this now, especially the athletic trainers and the managers and the coaches that are there. They're looking to see how the body moves as well. So it's not just the performance on how high, it's how did they land? How is their body able to perform just in general? Because yes, it is a significant difference on if it's an inch, height in comparison, especially when you're looking at the NBA. However, but even in the NFL, they look at all of these stats. And so if you've got good range of motion, you're able to explode off the blocks, they've got good knee alignment, then that means their hips are probably moving pretty well as well, meaning the glute max is firing. So they're going to be able to have more power in their hips. They're less likely to pull something. Their lower back is probably in better shape. And so all of it does translate into what they're going to be doing on the field, especially over those days. And one thing that I have actually been a part of, this is more for the NBA combine, was we did the overhead squat assessments. We did range of motion testing. We did different type of movement testing on wingspan, on shoulder movement, and what they call scapulothoracic rhythm, meaning the rhythm between the shoulder and the shoulder blade, to make sure that everything was moving as optimally as possible. Did they have good range of motion when they lifted their arms up, or did they have a low back arch? All of this stuff that we've learned through exercise science, physiology, biomechanics, we actually tested, and that information, like 1 through 100, how well did they move? That information also went along with those test results of what they did at the combine itself, because now people want to know, especially before they pay all of these millions of dollars, what are their chances of injury? Or if we do go ahead and draft this individual, what do we need to know is a weakness that we can work on, especially in the off season, in the camps, or with the athletic trainers, to make sure that when they go out on the field or they go out on the court, in that case, they're ready to do so well. And they're working to help kind of augment what was noticed in the combines. And that's something that a lot of people don't know. So that is truly behind the curtain. I don't know if they're doing that now in the NFL, but I know that was a big part of the NBA.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we saw an example of what, and you're the example you brought up, Wendy, with ankle, lack of ankle mobility, especially when that toe comes up towards the knee. We saw an example of an injury of that in the Super Bowl,
Oh,
unfortunately. Yeah, and I saw something on social media where there was a compilation of of Greenlaw's foot position when he's pushing, when he's running, when he's getting his starts. So they were showing, or not just when the injury happened, because he was hopping around and just he wasn't even in a play. He was running onto the field, and then the next day I saw a compilation of what his foot and ankle and his knee were doing relative to each other, and that just feeds to your point. Again, this was a Super Bowl, so it's the very end of the season. You've gone through a full season plus playoffs, and then ultimately the big game. However, when we talk about the combine, they too have gone through a full season, right? Maybe a bowl game and then training. So unless you're taking those things into consideration and having somebody guide you, like you said, Wendy, do you have range of motion? Do you have coordination? Do you have appropriate length tension relationships within that joint, as well as a balance of the other muscles that complement? In that case, Wendy, you brought up the calf complex. So from that standpoint, you need to have some consideration during the training process. And when you look at these physical assessments, and I know that different teams look at assessments differently, or they'll use a different battery of assessments when it comes to, okay, well, how mobile is this guy? How coordinated is this guy? And then they'll use that information to, and you can never 100% predict injury. But when it comes to injury potential, if someone doesn't move well, and then their body's going to have to take on the stresses and strains of training and practice and play, you want to know that, okay, well, if as an organization, you're going to spend millions of dollars, not only, if this guy can bench press, 225, 20 times, if they have a 4 or 5 or faster 40, those numbers can be impressive, but how well can they move, right? Anybody can, well, not say anybody, but a lot of these guys, when you train for it, you're going to be better at it. But if I've got to put you on the playing field, now you're standing up, you don't have 225 pounds on your chest, and you're not just jumping vertically, and you're not just jumping forward, but how well do you move, right?
yeah.
Can you change direction and not compromise, your joints too much when it comes to doing what you have to do on a regular basis?
Well, and I think too, when we talk about training in all three planes of motion, so forward and back and side to side and rotation, we've said many times that when you're decelerating, so when you're kind of lowering your body down, and you're rotating at the same time, that's where more injuries occur. That occurs in life, it occurs in sport. And that's one of the reasons why, as a teacher, as an instructor, that we really focus and talk a lot about moving and training in all three planes of motion, because that's what we do, especially these guys that are doing it in a very fast rate. There are other people that are coming at them. They have to keep their eye on the ball, so they're really not looking at what their feet or their body's doing, or even where they're going half of the time. They just know. And so, especially when you're looking at different positions, that's obviously extremely important. So to your point, I think it's important that they're training outside of what they're doing, because repetitive movement obviously will increase chances of injury long term. So if they're doing supplemental workouts and programs and somebody understands their position, they can work on the opposing muscles to get them stronger for better alignment. But it's also one of those things too, where we think that it's all about what's happening on the field. And if you really dive deep into the combines, and when we say literally on the back of the curtain, it is that overhead squat. It is the different movement assessments. Like you said, the battery of assessments that the body goes through. It's drug testing. That's a big one, because I know that they have to do that. They also are doing interviews. So Ken, I don't know if you know that too, but they actually do different types of interviews with different individuals, whether it's with a mic, on the camera, just sitting down, talking to different coaches. They're always on as well because they want to see how are they going to talk about the training, talk about themselves, talk about their experience and what this means to them, because that's also going to translate if they do make it to the big games and they get interviewed because they did something awesome, that they can handle themselves in that way. And it's also something that's going to be super supportive of the team, the managers, and especially the owners.
Yeah, I was talking to one of our then graduated players, and the funniest thing he says, like, well, they'll have the whiteboard behind them, and they'll say, okay, this is what you see. What do you do? What's your role in this? So there's a lot of game, real game situations on, and they want to see how they react. So that alone can be pretty stressful. But I remember one player saying, yeah, I sat down with this team, we talked for a little bit, but then they asked me 5 questions about this other player that's on the team who was also a very high, who wound up being a very high draft pick. So it's like they talked to me about, my position, but they wanted to know about this other guy just as much. I was like, well, that's just one of those things where it's like, okay, well, the teams, if they're looking at other players, they want to know what you have to offer, but they'll also try to gather a little bit of intel. I thought that was funny because I just thought, okay, well, here are the X's and O's, and how would you handle it? But they said, well, how is this guy really?
And they also change it up too to see how quick can you learn, because if you look at some of these books that they give you, they're like, here are all the plays and here are the different because they have to know the signals. I mean, guys, you've seen them on the field, they're throwing up hand signals, throwing up signs, doing all different kinds of things, and they have to know what's ahead. So when they call plays, they don't sit there and have to say, okay, Ken, the ball's coming to you, so you're going to have to go to left, and you're going to have to tackle this and make a hole here. I mean, we all know that, but it's one of those, how quick can they get it? How quick can they learn? And then, what is their stress level? And there are times too, where they'll put heart rates or monitors on them. And as they're going through some of these different tests, they'll also see how their body reacts to the stresses that are put in front of them, which I also find to be fascinating because I really like that. I want to know how the body performs, but I also want to know what's happening on the inside. I mean, we've seen that even in NASCAR when people are in cars and what's happening where they're in these really stressful situations and their heart rate is like just super chill. I would be a hot mess. I'm already grabbing the dashboard when my husband drives. Can't imagine that. But on the field, it's a completely different situation because they're looking at just your stats, the way that your body is able to deal with that kind of stress. But, I think there's a lot of comparison too, because people are like, well, what about the NBA and what about the combines? What are the differences? Now, again, we're talking about the NBA, right? Or the NFL right now. We know that it starts on the 26th. It goes through March 4th. The NBA draft usually doesn't start until I think May 16th-ish, that time frame. So there's a big difference there, but it's because the draft for the NBA is in June. And so, you've got to see what they're able to do for an immediate draft. But if you look at the comparisons, again, I talked about all the different, drills that they have to do. It's very, very specific. Well, it's the same for the NBA. Again, your position is always going to matter. But I thought it was interesting that they look at your height with shoes on and then without shoes. Yeah. They look at your wingspan, which I find to be interesting because then I would be out just by looking at me. They're like, girl, I don't even go to people's like belly buttons half the time when we're working with some of these NBA guys. Oh, yeah. Yeah. But they look at your body fat, they look at your hand, your size, not just the size itself, but the width. They want to know where your hand is in relation to the ball. They look at what else am I thinking? Body fat, the standing reach, the sitting reach, your different positions. All of that is being measured in the NBA, along with those movement assessments that I was telling you about, because I was a part of that. So I know that they take these movement assessments, guys. It's crazy.
No, it's not. I mean, they anthropometrically, they want to see every dimension.
Word. Can you say that again? Look at
like,
you.
Well, that's my 1 5-syllable word for the day. But well, it's funny. You talk about the basketball player, their hand relationship with the ball. They do the same thing with the NFL. They want to see what the quarterback's hands are, what the quarterback's hands are like, when it comes to the ball. And one of the quarterbacks at the time, I put my hand up against his, and he goes, the one knock against me is that I got small hands. And I put my hand against his, and I had my pinky to thumb was just a little bit bigger than his. I'm like, yeah, if my hands are bigger than yours, yeah, and you do have a knock against you.
I know. Well, I was, I actually grew an inch when I did my life insurance. So who knew? I kept saying I was a certain height, and apparently I was an inch taller. So yay me. But there is a little bit different too, because they do a no step vertical test, and then they do a vertical test max.
Yeah.
So again, one of the reasons why we really do look at good range of motion, because that is extremely important, especially in the NBA, more so than I think even in the NFL. Lane agility, they look at that. They look at the 3/4 court split, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
What else is there? There is obviously the bench press. That's a big one, because that's important, I guess. There are certain tests where I'm like, really? Right. But they do, I guess, want to see, kind of see how much they can bench and how strong they are. All of that's going to be important. But then again, too, they do look at someone's, they look at the records. They look at previous records. And, I've worked a ton with the NBA, and it's amazing how I'll look at what their history and their previous injuries are. And then I'll have a side conversation, and they'll say, well, listen, I had PRP on this day. I did this kind of thing. This isn't documented. We're keeping this under the record, because we don't want the doctors or the coaches to know that I had this done. However, I had this done so and so long ago, and it's been great. I've had no knee pain. I'm no bone on bone. So it's interesting, because there are things that you're going to see in their records, and there's some stuff that people are doing on the side that is not documented, because those injury reports are going to be huge. And, I find all of it fascinating. And again, I'm super passionate about this, because this is kind of like our wheelhouse. And if you are tuning in on Random Fit with myself, Wendy Batts, and Ken Miller, we're talking about, about the combines, whether it's the NFL, the NBA, we're kind of talking about the inside the combine curtains. So kind of behind the scenes, along with what you're going to see on television. And if you get a chance and you have not had the chance to watch it on television, it's crazy. Some of these times that people are putting out, and some of these metrics that they're getting, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. And I think just one other thing about the combine, and again, it's highlighted when you look at, ESPN or the NFL network, they're showing that, it is from dawn to dusk when it shows it. But I think a lot of people too don't realize that, they'll have that the event, in this case, the NFL, it's in Indianapolis. However, there are pro days at the universities themselves. So they'll host their own pro day, to where they'll highlight their own specific players. The scouts will come out, and they'll just have an opportunity to go on site. And you'll also see that even though they get an invitation, sometimes they'll perform all of the assessments, but sometimes they'll say, you know what, I'm going to hold off on that, but I'm going to do something at this site or this at my old university, and I'm going to do this assessment over there. So sometimes it's a not all or nothing. They will hold off on certain events if they think they can do better at a later time someplace else. So there's that, and that gets pretty crazy too. So yeah, it's crazy because you have and back then you didn't have the basic the nil contracts, right? So everything was heavily weighted on when they had a chance to perform. So you had the scouts, you had agents, and because it's open, you have the friends and family, and there's people watching from all levels relative to the sport. So when if you have a chance and you find out about a local pro day, and you can see for yourself, because that is usually open, depending on the player or the university that's going to be there. And it's quite a sight, because they'll do the bench there, they'll do the 40, they'll do the vertical. So they'll do all the assessments for that university's team, just again, highlight their players as opposed to other players. So there are multiple events when it comes to this combine training. Not everything happens in Indianapolis when it comes to player evaluation, but just know that there are other locations that are possible when it comes to looking at what a player can do. So,
well, and I think it's also important too that a lot is, well, I know this more for the NBA, and I'm guessing it's the same for NFL, but I know if you're coming in your international, so for all of our international listeners, there is a Euro camp that's where they usually do their testing. So not all of the people that are international fly into the States to do the NBA combine. They actually do their own, and then they all get together with those stats. Now, granted, if it's somebody that a team really, really wants, they will fly them in, but oftentimes the international one is separate. In case you didn't know.
right.
Fun fact.
Well, any chance, yeah, well, any chance that, you know, an organization has to look at who can potentially improve their team's performance, you know, there's
Look at the Greek freak. I'm just telling you, you know.
Yeah, he's amazing. I love watching.
I only say that, y'all, in case you didn't know, I'm half Greek. My mother was 100% off the boat from Athens, and so I'm a fan just because it was her country. So
well, that, and he's a good player,
and he's amazing.
And he's an amazing player.
And his shoes are cute. So yes,
yes,
I own those. I do.
Well, Wendy, I think we've combined the NFL and the NBA as far as what teams use, or, you know, those two leagues use to evaluate their players. And it's a lot of people, again, for those 2 days, there's months of preparation that people don't realize. And even after or before or during what you see, what's on TV, there's a lot of stuff that's happening off camera. So I think hopefully we shed some light on what these hopeful professional athletes, you know, are going through when it comes to the combine. So big stuff, and that they have to go. I mean, I feel for these guys, really. So so hopefully we've enlightened you all when it comes to the combine. So thank you for listening to us, both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller, on this episode of Random Fit, when we go inside the combine curtain. So you like what we had to talk about today? Like, follow, subscribe, share, download, and more importantly, let us know what more you want us to talk about here on Random Fit. So until next time, everybody, take care and be well.